Thank you. It's good to be with you today, and I express gratitude for being able to participate in the conference and to our kind hosts here at Lambeth Palace. And I hope that what I share may help to enhance and shape the important conversation about the ethics of AI in the world of faith. As a believer, I intentionally say AI in the world of faith instead of faith in the world of AI. Because for me, faith has always existed and is central to the foundation of the world. And you'll find today that my belief in a post-mortal existence as well as a pre-mortal existence and the strong purpose of life underpin the perspectives and the thoughts that I'll share today. And though my remarks are not given as an official spokesperson, I am a lifelong Christian and member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I'm grateful for the current opportunity that I have to serve as a bishop in the church in California. Professionally, I'm actually not the Chief Technology Officer of KPMG, but I do serve in an executive capacity within our global technology organization. And in fact, being involved with AI has been part of my career ever since I was in university. My first role out of university involved sifting by hand through an entire project room of boxed documents with the objective of finding single sheets of paper that had data tables of specific medicine prices, and I would then have to manually key those into a digital database. So thinking back to that experience and the first day of work leaving after midnight, I'm definitely grateful for how AI has transformed our ability to work with data. And I've also been involved with what I like to call quantitative AI, where we deal with numbers as the output as opposed to language and concepts. So it's been a fascinating opportunity to be involved in this space and then to see the advent of ubiquitous generative AI. But perhaps most important, I come to you today as a father, directly invested in the well-being of my 4 children on their journey to discover faith. I think often about the many things that will influence them along the way, and the truth is, I'm not worried about AI. To quote Paul from the New Testament, "For I know in whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him." Regardless of how AI does or does not evolve, I believe that God is good and that his righteous purposes for the earth will prevail. And yet, in a way, I am worried about AI. As we've heard already today, it is a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it has the potential and the capacity to be a blessing to the faithful and to enable God's work for good on the earth. On the other, AI can stymie and detract from faith. And worse still, it has the ability to destroy what is sacred and divine within us if we allow it to. The same can be said for other significant technological breakthroughs, and we heard a list earlier today. But in mine, I think of the printing press, photography, video, the internet, and social media, all things that can be used for good and evil. Unfortunately, like these and most other technologies, AI risks having a significantly uneven impact among its users. It will bless and enable some, and it will likely harm others, both within the workplace and within the sphere of faith. Specifically, I'm concerned for those who are seeking reliable information to build and strengthen a foundation of faith. I am concerned for those who allow AI to define them and to define itself, or worse, those who inadvertently or deliberately allow AI to be their God. And I worry about those without the guidance or access to guidance that will help them use AI in a way that enables instead of outsources faith. So today I share 3 principles for helping and protecting these who are particularly exposed to the risks of AI on the development of faith. Through comparisons and contrasts between my observations of AI at work and AI in the world of faith, I hope that these will be helpful as we map out the importance of both governance and human intentionality in AI. First, the criticality of trusted information sources. Second, the importance of understanding what AI is and what AI is not. And third, the recognition that human thinking and effort constitute the path that really matters for developing intelligent faith. So we begin with trusted information. Even before generative AI became a household thing, many businesses believed that algorithms and other forms of AI could magically find insights. I had many clients that I spoke with that believed this. They believed these deep insights were obscured by the obvious and unimportant and hidden from view only because humans did not know how to look for them. However, the failure of many corporate initiatives motivated by this myth ultimately demonstrated that AI models are only as good as what is used to train and test them. The how was important, but the what was crucial. In earlier days, when the term big data served as the backdrop for AI, we often referred to the 5 V's of data. They were helpful then, and I believe they are helpful now, particularly to illustrate the importance of trusted information in the context of AI and faith. In feeding AI with data about faith, volume is not always better. Instead, we need AI that can be governed to search out and rely on authoritative rather than exhaustive sources about faith traditions. To borrow a recently shared phrase, AI as it pertains to sharing information about faith must be resistant to deluge. But while AI needs to be focused in this way on sources that matter, we also need AI that is pluralistic, meaning that it reflects without bias the variety of traditions and paradigms across the faith landscape. AI must not favor one above another or even belief above atheism. In the business world, individuals tend to compete based on information value, veracity, and velocity, the last of the 3 V's. Who knows what and when? In contrast, religious tenets and the expression of faith are not driven by or measured by speed. Rather, it's the stability, authenticity, and immutability of faith that prove its worth, its value. Even if AI cannot and should not claim to declare what is true, can it at least claim to correctly convey what others believe to be true? I believe this should be the goal. In that sense, AI should seek to be faithful by accurately and consistently representing faith traditions. But even when AI is effectively trained on trusted information and can reliably share that information back, AI can only go so far. The best models and users of AI understand when AI has reached its limit of usefulness. As a work example from a few years ago, a team at my firm built the first AI-driven scheduling engine for a professional sports league. Replacing spreadsheets and manual process, the ultimate AI solution created more than 32 trillion plausible schedules based on the inputs, needs, and constraints of the league. Each schedule was evaluated against a set of competing parameters, such as player rest time between games and travel mileage, to then score and rank the best schedules. At that point, it would have been very tempting to take the mathematically optimal schedule as the winner. However, even with all the trusted information correctly processed and reflected in the outputs, the AI model could not claim to know how to best arbitrate among the many and varied parameters that were important to the league. That step was left to the trusted judgment of the client, who then manually tuned the parameters according to their priorities and preferences to achieve the final schedule. So this takes us to the second principle, the importance of understanding what AI is and what it is not. A popular sentiment and active pursuit among many corporations is the notion of creating digital or AI employees. We saw a picture earlier of the embodiment of different forms of AI. Recent months have seen the CEOs of some of the most powerful AI companies claim that one day AI might be able to take over the top job, the job of CEO. And this could very well be a possibility. If you combine the documented knowledge of an industry's sharpest thinkers, and you include all of the information about the historical industry challenges and decisions that they have faced, you just might be able to create an agentic AI persona, one that could possibly navigate all the issues and the decisions to the satisfaction of shareholders. It's possible. Would an AI CEO be considered an employee? Perhaps. There can be many definitions for what constitutes an employee, though I question whether AI would be allowed to replace a human when responding, for example, to an official summons by Parliament. Would an AI model be able to take the place of Mark Zuckerberg, for example, in a discussion about technology concerns? Would an AI CEO be considered a person, a human? Well, that most definitely depends on how we define what it means to be human or to have human intelligence. We've discussed large language models already today, and so as you know, they drive generative AI's ability to communicate, and they're trained on vast, vast troves of data. And the data span many different types: poetry, texts on maths, tables of latitude and longitude, and lots of cat pictures and videos. But if we iteratively peel back the layers of this data to discover how the first of such data points were originally obtained, we always arrive back at a human writing a verse, a human expressing a formula, a human devising a coordinate system, and a human capturing the very first photograph. This is certainly true of the information behind the AI applications in use at my firm. The LLMs that we use are largely trained on public information. Then within a protected environment, they are pointed at private information produced by the firm's employees. Subsequently, users prompt the AI model for the firm's point of view about a particular topic, and they receive an AI curated version of employee-created content. In this way, we might describe AI as retrieval, shaping, and sharing on the sole basis of what others have originally created. Even if it appears to have original intelligence, AI is always and simply a derivative of the intelligence of others. This reality stands in stark contrast to the growing perceptions and practices of society, particularly among the youth of the world. A recent study reported that almost 3/4 of teens have used AI companions. Half of them use at least a few times a month, and a third have used them for social interaction and relationships. This anthropomorphizing of AI represents a very slippery slope. As individuals increasingly interact with AI as though it were human, or to take the place of a human, they begin to implicitly elevate AI to the status of human, and at the same time denigrate humans to the definition of AI that we just articulated. Nothing more than derived expression of the intelligence of others. In effect, they reduce human identity to being defined exclusively by the ability to communicate and reason. But what of the fact that as humans, we do things like breathe and sleep, give birth and die, or more importantly, that we have an innate awareness of our existence independent of anyone or anything else? AI may be capable of begetting more AI, but it will never be capable of creating a human or becoming a human. Even so, AI is being improved every day in its ability to communicate and reason, to convey purported intelligence in ways that mimic human dialogue. As it does, the slope deepens for us, and for users to slide farther away from a correct understanding of what it means to be human. As people become less grounded in what uniquely defines us, I suggest that eventually they will also be unable to grasp the concept of a supernal and independent God. Our faith-based identity as human beings cannot be sustainably separated from a faith-based understanding of God. When someone loses the first, they open themselves to losing the second. For such individuals, a faith-based concept of God then risks blurring into shades of confusion, fading into shadows of indifference, and at some point, ceasing to be a possibility for them at all. For years, many inside and outside of the AI technical community have conjectured about artificial general intelligence, AGI, as we talked about earlier, as well as artificial superintelligence. In essence, these can be described respectively as AI that can do everything a human can do, or AI that can do more than all humans can do. These speculations make it even easier for people to allow for or even embrace as a substitute AI in the place of a holy God, whether in name, in perceived omniscience, or as a source of binding truth. This misguided thinking that man can create God is captured in this scriptural warning. Quote, "Oh, the vainness and the frailties and the foolishness of men. When they are learned, they think they are wise, and they hearken not unto the counsel of God. For they set it aside, supposing they know of themselves. Wherefore their wisdom is foolishness." End quote. Deliberate and thoughtful governance among AI providers might succeed in helping some of the more overt instances of AI simulating God or masquerading as human or God. However, I believe the more important and effective protection against the deification of AI will come from the trusted stewards of faith traditions, those who teach and reaffirm the holiness and eternity of God. As one such steward recently declared, quote, "Deity is not defined solely by knowledge and reasoning. In its theological sense of light and truth, divine and human intelligence are not and cannot be artificial," end quote. With this in mind, we now come to the third principle of protecting the vulnerable, the principle that the thinking and effort of the human comprise the path that matters most to the development of intelligent faith. Please indulge a final parallel from the workplace: the use of AI to generate meeting notes. Initial functionality of AI tools for notes was rudimentary, but still quite helpful. When prompted, AI could summarize the discussion in chronological fashion and label adjacent ideas and topics within helpful themes. This type of summary gave participants a straightforward, if incomplete, map of what had transpired. In turn, it could then be compared for accuracy with handwritten or hand-typed notes, which at that point were still commonly kept by meeting participants. After a few human edits, the adjusted AI summary could be distributed as the minutes for the meeting. Then AI got smarter. While capturing the live transcript, it began to proactively organize meeting topics as we went and create notes without any prompting of what to do. Themes would automatically appear with supporting bullet points to collate the specific topics that were discussed, regardless of when they surfaced during the meeting. To-do lists were auto-populated. Decision logs were captured. It seemed incredible, if everything was accurate. In theory, AI would organize the chaos, polish the problem, find those deep insights, bring conflicting human viewpoints into harmony, offer a concisely worded set of key takeaways, and set the right path in motion. Going forward, all the humans would need to do is show up, talk, and leave. And that's exactly what they did. They stopped taking their own notes. They paid less attention to detail. They multitasked more during meetings. The urgency to achieve clarity diminished. They allowed meetings to conclude without an agreed articulation of what had been decided or what needed to be done and by whom. Without realizing, they relaxed their use of human cognitive processing in ways that affected their attention, pattern recognition, and ability to synthesize. And a comical yet honest refrain began to emerge during these meetings. Don't worry about it. AI will take care of it for us. Perhaps the shift is less pervasive than I think, or perhaps the scenario just resembles me the most. But nevertheless, the simple example reflects the danger of outsourcing thought and effort. And in life, isn't it the simplest of things in which we often struggle the most to maintain vigilance? To be fair, best practices in AI development and usage, in my experience, have always emphasized the importance of what's known as the human in the loop. As most of you know, this phrase refers to human involvement and validation in the production and refinement loop of an AI workflow from inputs to outputs. And so why are we as humans necessary? Because we know the definitive underlying information markers that matter as pertains to a particular topic. And still today, humans are vastly superior to AI in recognizing AI hallucinations or fabrications, particularly in the day-to-day consumption patterns for users. AI can be a powerful force for augmentation, refinement, and efficiency, but only with real-time human effort and intelligence as the critical ingredients. So, how is it then that we gain this kind of intelligence as humans? Answers to this question could fill thousands of volumes and libraries, and I'm sure they do. But for today, I posit a straightforward, if not simplistic, response. Our learning is provided by lived experiences that introduce, explain, validate, reinforce, and put into practice, though the process is often nonlinear, lengthy, costly, and sometimes painful. This is also true of the process to develop faith in God and to then strive to live by that faith. We might describe it as a repetitive cycle of learning, accepting, doing, and finally becoming. As previously discussed, learning about God and faith traditions through AI is possible with trusted data and trustworthy judgment. When properly governed and viewed for what it is, AI can be a very helpful teaching tool. But amid the many faith traditions and points of view, how do we as humans accept what AI might be helping to explain to us, specifically when it cannot and should not be trusted as an arbiter of truth? As humans, we ponder, we reason, we consider knowledge against the backdrop of everything else we have observed in life. We evaluate our choices and the attendant consequences. We draw closer to or farther from the people with whom we have shared life. And perhaps most important, we are the only ones who are accountable for what we do with the knowledge and divine guidance we receive in our lives. However, even as humans, after we have accepted something to be foundational to our faith choice, sometimes we still struggle to keep the faith. Is there a place for AI here? Well, a few years ago, my family and I experienced a difficult and emotional period of time. We unexpectedly relocated to a new home, and my children were acutely feeling the loss of their suddenly distant friends when overnight their world seemed to shut down as the local restrictions of the COVID-19 pandemic isolated them even more. As a father, I knelt in prayer asking God to bless me with greater faith, to believe that their sorrow could and would be removed and their hearts healed. I was asking for the faith to believe that that could happen. In that moment, there was no AI or even human-generated information, recommendation, encouragement, or image that could give me the greater faith I so desperately was looking for. What I needed could only come from God, and it did. In the end, it is through these moments of exercising and growing our faith that we become more than we were yesterday. We can become more kind, more understanding, more empathetic, more courageous, more believing, more committed, more disciplined, more faithful. AI, with all its access to trusted information and power to reason, cannot become human and will not become God. And we, with all our access to AI, cannot and will not become what God intends for us to be if we ignore the pitfalls of AI and relinquish our thinking and our agency to choose. Instead, I invite us all to consider how individually and collectively we can preserve and enable the pursuit of this all-important dynamic, the pursuit of intentional human thinking and human striving in the midst of AI, to obtain and then live by the intelligence, faith, and character that we seek to receive from God. I close with the words of T.S. Eliot, who provides this guiding human prompt. All our knowledge brings us nearer to our ignorance. All our ignorance brings us nearer to death. But nearness to death, no nearer to God? Where's the life we have lost in living? Where's the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where's the knowledge we have lost in information? Thank you.
So, questions from the audience?
Can I give a parallel to your story of the sports
Please.
scheduling? My daughter's a consultant surgeon. She does the rota for the other consultants. And she thought, this is a perfect opportunity for AI. So she learned to use it. She wrote a prompt, came back with nonsense. She refined the prompt, and so on, and so on, and so on. But it was still scheduling consultants for a night when they just come off holiday, or for Jews on high holy days and Christians on Christmas, and so on. And so after a series of efforts, when she recognized that she wasn't giving it all her built-in knowledge, she gave up and wrote the rota herself. It's limited.
Well, what's interesting about optimization problems, as I found it, is first-time prompts in AI rarely produce any kind of acceptable outcome, but they can be quite good at producing the code that you would need to then go build an optimization model. So far, I haven't seen anything yet. Maybe Claude Code that just got announced this week will be better at it, but I haven't seen that built in as a submodel yet, because optimization problems are very complicated and very difficult to solve.
And there are only 6 consultants.
I'm sorry?
There are only 6 on the road.
At that point, I think a napkin works, but yeah.
Further questions? Deb?
This may be a slightly ill-formed thought, so please forgive me. But I think what you said at the end of your talk, I thought was fascinating. It was a great talk. When you said about actually asking for, in uncertainty, for the belief, for asking for belief. And I think there's something really interesting there in that AI obviously is always certain. The certainty is part of what people arguably are looking for. They're wanting an answer, and it doesn't sit within ambiguity. But I think it's probably a thought that I hadn't thought more about. I know that in decision-making systems, there's been talk about you need to represent uncertainty so that people can feel confident in how much they integrate in the system. But I actually think there's such a strong point there. But I'm kind of grasping at it. But your point about belief and our need as humans to sit in belief and hope is essential to who we are, and that's very absent from AI systems. And I think we risk losing that perhaps if we have machines that, in the social context, like companions, give you perennial kind of certainty over outcomes. I think there's just found that really interesting. It's not really a question.
Well, an anecdote that comes to mind, so my daughter plays competitive soccer, or football, and the other day had an injury to her ankle at the end of a game. So she came to the side of the field, and I said, hey, we need to get some ice on that. And she absolutely said no. Now, what's interesting is my daughter and I have a great relationship, and I think in most things she trusts me. But let's pretend for a moment that she trusted me entirely. She still said no. And so I just did whatever I could to say, hey, we'll put on a compression sock. She didn't want to do that. And then her coach made his way over to check on her ankle, and what did he tell her? He told her two things: ice it and put on a compression sock, and she immediately responded and agreed to do it. So what do I take from that? Well, at some point it comes down to, call it a spark, call it a conscience, a deliberate choice that we independently can make irrespective of what's happening around us. And that's what I think we are trying to preserve when we talk about faith in the presence of AI. I think there are those who are vulnerable who maybe either don't recognize it or don't trust that inner spark, that will then be tempted to overtly rely on what AI, even if it's offered in a suggested way, will still rely on that versus paying attention to what they learn and feel. Thank you.
Any further questions? Yep. Myron?
Also, a very not formed, fabulous talk. You were saying in your example of praying, and what I wrote down, to what or to who do we turn when we struggle, and what ideas give us solace and hope? And it seems to me there's something in the way that AI exists that it's become easier to turn to that for solace and hope. So I'm thinking, how do we strengthen our own internal authority, for want of a better word, to turn to the unknown, or to a place where the answers are not so obviously forthcoming, or because it is just faith. And so there's something for me in that about the difficulty, I think, sometimes in turning to faith when the world is about certainty and about security, and being lost. I don't know, I'm not making sense. We don't look for that so easily. So how would you conceive of that in terms of strengthening that capacity within us?
It comes down to something that I mentioned at the beginning, which I didn't elaborate on too much, about my particular belief in the belief that we lived before we were born and that we will live after we die. In the context of a much longer, even infinite period of existence, the difficulties and the pains we might experience in this mortal life it's not then the objective to minimize those. It's helpful. There are practical things that we should do to avoid tripping and skinning our knee. But the elimination of those experiences is not the point. And I'll happily describe more offline, but for us, I believe that God's intervention in the world and in life is not intended to eliminate difficulty or pain. In fact, the experience of having that without having certain knowledge is the point. And it comes back to that word becoming. Can we become the kind of person who, irrespective of the circumstances we feel or go through, can still retain and emote the peace that we know that ultimately there's a higher power and that everything will be okay? And I think that's the only way that I've been able to cope with things like the passing of my father when, relatively speaking, I feel like he was quite young, or the loss of a niece, or any number of other difficulties that face us. We ask that question, why? And AI can't provide the answer to why. Quite frankly, maybe most humans can't provide the answer to why. But in the process and the exercise of asking a higher power why, and more importantly, asking for help to endure that difficulty, I think that's the essence of humanity and what we're trying to experience in mortality.
Okay, very good. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Ammon. And